Welcome to another episode on vegan deficiencies. Today we're going to discuss omega-3 fatty acids. It is in fact really difficult to name one single deficiency that would be the most critical, the most dangerous, while on a vegan diet. It's not just notorious B12 that everyone seems to be supplementing with, but it is a whole complex of nutritional deficits that not only occur, but they also can be complementary to each other, and some of them can even lead to each other. All of those things are very tightly intertwined. The nutrients that are missing on a vegan diet but are found in the animal product spend far beyond vitamin B12, and most importantly, those nutrients, they come with all necessary cofactors for supporting healthy metabolism. An important prerequisite for this specific video when we're discussing omega-3s is my video on cholesterol. You will find it in the Vegan Deficiencies playlist. And I left the link to access that video in the playlist in the description box below. Yet at the same time, I strongly encourage you to watch the entire Vegan Deficiencies series, where I will still be adding more videos, so maybe make sure to subscribe to my channel to not miss the few upcoming videos that will complete the series, and also subscribe to not miss out on my ex-vegan study documentary. Also, before we delve in, please like the video. Today we're going to study why you're likely to develop fatty acid imbalances and deficiencies on a vegan diet, and what health consequences it may have. We will also cover such an interesting topic as omega-3 supplements. The focus of today's talk is two fatty acids, long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acid, omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. Those are commonly found in the algae, in fish, and in ruminant animals that are specifically grass-fed, in the tissues of the ruminant animals, and in their milk. Ruminant animals accumulate omega-3 fatty acids in their tissues by converting the alpha-linolenic acid that is found in grasses and wild grasses that they consume. And owing to the specifics of their digestive system that is very efficient in extracting nutrients from the grass, and thanks to symbiotic bacteria that help to break down the cellulose and extract the nutrients, including the fatty acids. So for ruminant animals, plant fatty acids are quite bioavailable. Plus also think what amount of grasses those animals are capable of passing through them. All of this ensures that their flesh and milk contain those very long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. Now let's talk about the vegan sources of omega-3s. Specifically, EPA and DHA are found only in the algae, in the marine microalgae or in macroalgae. In my table of nutrients, I classified EPA and DHA as essential and practically unavailable, despite the fact that we still can find EPA and DHA in the algae. However, realistically, you cannot satisfy your needs in EPA and DHA on a vegan diet through consumption of algae only. If you were to eat seaweed, then you're lacking enzymes to actually break down the polysaccharides that make up the body of the seaweed. It needs to come in processed form, such as algae oil, to be able to actually get some omega-3 from them. And even if you were to eat this amount of seaweed daily, you will get blasted with so much metals, with so much iodine, that it could be potentially toxic for you as well. This is how much seaweed you would need to eat per day to satisfy your daily needs in EPA and DHA. I actually have a recipe video with a very delicious seaweed salad, but it doesn't use nearly as much seaweed, and it would be really impossible to eat any more of it on a daily basis. Especially 30 grams of seaweed would provide you anywhere from 4 to 130 grams of EPA and DHA combined, and you need 200 to 500 milligrams per day. So it is just unrealistic to rely on seaweed, algae for receiving EPA and DHA. Well, with that in mind, isn't algae oil an option then? Since it carries the extracted EPA and DHA in the concentrated form. We'll discuss it in the end of this video. The second mechanism through which you can be receiving EPA and DHA on a vegan diet is through conversion, because alpha-linolenic acid is contained in flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, then in wild plants, in some oils of the plants that contain this fatty acid, and in walnuts. Again, fruits and grasses, they also contain alpha-linolenic acid, but in smaller amounts. So if internal conversion is an option, then why did they classify EPA and DHA as essential nutrient then? The consensus of medical science, nutritional science, is that they are indeed essential fatty acids, and it is recommended to receive preformed EPA and DHA. The reason for that is that the conversion rate of alpha-linolenic acid contained in plants into EPA and DHA, since it's a two-step process from alpha-linolenic acid to EPA, the conversion rate is from 1 to 10%. And further, the conversion rate is only up to 5% to form it into DHA. For this reason, since the cumulative conversion rate is only 0.01%, for this reason, those extra long chain fatty acids are considered essential. Moreover, the conversion rate depends on your genetics, depends on your sex, depends on your age, depends on your reproductive status, depends on certain diseases that you may have, certain chronic diseases, and also depends on the alcohol, and moreover, it also depends on how much of omega-6 you're consuming with your diet. If we look at the prevalence of genetically predetermined inefficient conversion of alpha-linolenic acid into EPA based on the origin, then we will see that 59% of Americans, 57% of East Asians, 35% of Europeans will suffer from inefficient conversion of alpha-linolenic acid into EPA. At the same time, if we look at the demographics of South Asians and Africans, then the percent of people who may be affected by polymorphism that prevents them from converting LA into EPA efficiently will be only 14 and 2% respectively. This data means that South Asians and Africans could benefit from alpha-linolenic acid supplementation, yet people of other origins would rather require direct consumption of EPA and DHA. Now, when it comes to vegans and vegetarians even though vegetarians, they do receive eggs, they do eat dairy, that ideally, if they come from pasture-raised hens and from grass-fed cows, would have very good ratio of omega-3 omega-6. Despite that, vegetarians and vegans are grouped together as a category of people who are deficient, who are likely to be deficient in omega-3s. The current evidence suggests that populations, especially vegans and vegetarians around the world, are not meeting the recommended intake of LA, EPA, and DHA. The National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey data on omega-3 fatty acid intake demonstrated a substantial difference in EPA and DHA intake based on gender, age, and pregnancy status. The vulnerable populations, children and women, are consuming amounts far below the RDA. For instance, children aged 6 to 11 years consume only 4.5 to 27% RDA of the EPA and DHA. Recently, studies show that dietary omega-3 intakes and total omega-3 erythrocyte plasma fatty acids are found to be significantly lower in vegans and vegetarians than in fish eaters and omnivores. The vegan diet is deficient in EPA and DHA and is about 50-60% lower than that of the omnivore group. That said, when a person becomes deficient in omega-3s, the body may ramp up the conversion from LA to EPA and DHA. However, it still will be quite limited. And be mindful that it is a chemical reaction. Any chemical reaction requires reagents, environment. Since it's an enzymatic reaction, it requires active enzymes, so it requires a lot of minerals to keep the enzymes active. It also requires some energy, and overall, the body can only convert a limited amount of alpha-linolenic acid to the final product, DHA. We actually talked about biochemistry of non-essential nutrients in one of the videos from the series on vegan deficiencies. And we discussed that we need to be mindful to provide all the necessary components that go into assembly of those nutrients inside of the body, in case if we want to rely on internal synthesis of certain nutrients only. For conversion of alpha-linolenic acid into EPA and DHA, should we rely on plant sources of omega-3s only, we need to keep in mind that it may be significantly limited by the concurrent consumption of omega-6 fatty acids, because they compete for the enzymes that convert them, that turn them into long-chain molecules. In addition, you need to have adequate levels of calcium, magnesium, copper, zinc, iron, as those minerals are used to retain the enzyme activity. Another thing that is required for converting LA plant omega-3 into very long-chain omega-3s is B vitamins, such as B2, B6, and vitamin B12. Also bear in mind that you cannot be anemic and be capable of efficient synthetic reactions. I have a very good video on some not so apparent blood tests that are essential for vegans. Please check it out. Bear in mind also that erythrocytes, your red blood cells, they require omega-3 for structural stability, for elasticity. So being deficient in omega-3 while also being anemic, if you happen to have some B12 deficiency, some iron deficiency, will be exacerbating the symptoms, will be exacerbating your condition in case of occurrence of those complementary deficiencies. Because your body relies on delivery of oxygen, because oxygen is necessary for production of energy, for ATP. ATP is necessary again for all synthetic reactions. All proteins are synthesized with participation of those energy units. This may turn into a very comprehensive issue. It might be very difficult to pinpoint, even if you conduct certain blood work, what is the root of your condition on a vegan diet. Among other factors that can reduce the rate of conversion of LA into EPA and DHA is fatty liver disease as well. I discussed what groups of vegans may kind of run into this problem of fatty liver disease in this video on fruit juices. Consuming foods high in omega-6, which are vegan dairy like cheeses, milks that are stuffed with a bunch of seed oils, consuming fake meats, consuming oils such as sunflower oil, safflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil, except for high oleic soybean oil, sesame oil, grapeseed oil, palm oil, avocado and rice bran oil, as well as most nuts and seeds, except for walnuts and flax and hemp and chia seeds, will inhibit conversion of already scarce and barely convertible alpha-linolenic acid into EPA and DHA by about 50%. But not that it matters at that point, because given how small the conversion rate is to begin with, plus also multiplied by potentially you having certain genetic specifics that would further reduce it, then when you divide it by 2, it kind of doesn't even make sense to consider it. More concerning things about the disproportional consumption of omega-6 on a vegan diet and also on processed food diet, which actually, interestingly, with respect to fatty acid balance, vegan diet is even worse than an average some arbitrary omnivore diet, which is usually not that great anyway. The more concerning thing about it is how it affects your cardiovascular health and cardiovascular health prospects and also brain health. When you consistently overdose on omega-6, in the conditions when omega-3s are virtually absent in your diet. But we'll discuss the symptoms of omega-3 deficiency and omega-6 excess a little bit later in this video. EPA and especially DHA are essential nutrients and must be delivered with food. Because even if you try to create the best conditions to ensure the most efficient conversion of LA into EPA and DHA, you still will be looking at quite minute numbers. The situations most likely to induce omega-3 deficiency would be where people were wholly reliant on grain-based diets with an absence of green leafy vegetables, ruminant meats, and vegetable oils, such as soybean oil. This is strange because soybean oil is high in omega-6 compared to omega-3, so you need to specify that it's high oleic. Soybean oil, which has omega-6 to 3 ratio 2 to 1. It cannot be just any soybean oil. Canola oil or olive oil and marine foods containing DHA, and who used vegetable oils for cooking with high omega-6 and low omega-3 levels such as groundnut oil and sunflower oil. The diets which are most likely to lead to deficiency of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids and tissues will be vegetarian and vegan diets. What do we need omega-3 for? Providing adequate amounts of omega-3 is required for lowering risk of cardiovascular disease and reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease mortality due to reducing plaque buildup. For prevention of sudden death from arrhythmia, prevention of blood clots, reducing risk of breast cancer and other cancers, reducing risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, preventing age-related macular degeneration, for cell membrane and structure and strength, for supporting intracellular interactions, reducing inflammation, for skin health, supporting healthy brain development, aiding in reducing depression and anxiety, preventing autoimmune diseases. Omega-3 is necessary to consume during pregnancy for the baby's adequate brain development, healthy eyesight, adequate early development, prevention of cancers, prevention of asthma, prevention of allergic reactions, prevention of premature birth. Then also it is important for prevention of postpartum depression in mothers and for reducing risk of miscarriages. People who suffer from repeated miscarriages may benefit from getting tested for omega-3s and for correcting their diet. Important note here is that DHA can actually cross blood-brain barrier, even though it is apparently quite similar in size to lipoproteins that hardly can cross blood-brain barrier. So, they can, but the rate is small. So, consuming the preformed DHA is important for brain health, yet brain has internal defense system and is capable of more efficient conversion of LA into DHA, which further emphasizes the importance of omega-3 fatty acids for the brain health. In fact, actually, some studies show that conversion of LA into DHA in the brain may be sufficient to fulfill the brain's needs in this fatty acid. While the number of studies is limited and the design features are diverse, the studies implicate problems in learning and behavior as detrimental effects of DHA deficiency in otherwise healthy children. For example, during infancy, the brain accretes a large amount of DHA as it grows, and post-mortem studies have found that breastfed infants have significantly higher brain DHA concentrations than infants fed formula that contains LA but not DHA. Therefore, this may be an instance where DHA synthesis from LA is not sufficient to supply the brain, and preformed DHA is required. So we looked at those two things, and it appears to me that, specifically in children, the demand for exogenous DHA is much higher than in the adults, because in the adults, it seems like the brain is capable of synthesizing an appreciable amount of DHA from LA precursors. However, again, it's inconclusive. And we talk only about the brain here. But in children, again, as I emphasized in all of my vegan deficiency series videos, if you're running a vegan experiment on your children, you are imposing huge risks, huge health and wellness and well-being risk on your children. So please reconsider your choices. Your lifestyle is not worth the well-being of your children throughout their entire life. Now, let's say we stop consuming omega-3s altogether. Let's say you become vegan, and you eat munch 1 tablespoon of flax seeds per day or some chia pudding every now and then, but virtually you're not getting omega-3s anymore. How long will it take you to become deficient? In general, when I read through the studies that looked into deficiency in omega-3 in vegan and vegetarian populations, they took participants that were vegan and vegetarian for at least 6 months. So this was their cutoff, and this is where they observed the deficiencies. But omega-3s are not stored in our body. They get removed from our body in a matter of 2 weeks, which means that whenever your next cycle of cell renewal will happen, we'll already be lacking omega-3s. So within a few months of being vegan, you will start experiencing, even if you don't notice that, you will start experiencing the outcomes of omega-3 deficiency. And if we look at the reverse situation, for example, you quit veganism or you changed your diet from processed standard American diet to eating more high quality foods, for example, grass-fed animal products, grass-fed dairy, and you remove the seed oils from your diet. In that case, it will take you 3 months of that regimen, if you reintroduce, for example, introduced fish in your diet and stuff like that. It will take you 3 months to see the benefits of that, full benefits, because again, this is how much it takes to renew, for example, your red blood cells, to go through the full cycle. So 3 months is the term that you need to work on your diet, monitor omega-3s closely if you want to correct your diet to favor omega-3 consumption. Actually, let me know in the comments. I have a video idea to look into the timeline of ex-vegan recovery, because different nutrients, they take different amount of time to start working when you start supplying them again into your body. If you were deficient in certain things, whether you were vegan or again, if you were on some crappy diet, some nutritionally void diet, some processed diet and whatnot. So I'm really curious to look into the timeline, because we see that post-vegan recovery does take several months before people start seeing very vivid changes before they go back to their normal self. It usually takes just a few weeks to start noticing the first changes, but some global reformation of the body sometimes takes up to several months. And I think it would be a curious thing to look into. So let me know in the comments if you would be interested in seeing and analyzing that with me. Now let's look into omega-6 to 3 ratio significance. We focus on omega-3 deficiency primarily due to the dysfunctional dietary changes of the relatively recent past. The agricultural revolution, changes in animal feed favoring grains, increased consumption of grains, development of processed foods. They all led to humans starting being exposed to much higher relative amounts of omega-6 compared to omega-3. A lot of the modern diets, they have the shifted ratio. You can also add to it the widespread hysteria around cholesterol and saturated fats that arose in the beginning or in the middle of the 20th century, which led to substitution of animal fats with plant fats that are saturated with omega-6. And that led to increased overconsumption of omega-6. While this problem exists in general in the omnivore population that is maybe less aware of the issue, as we saw earlier, it is exacerbated in vegan, plant-based, vegetarian populations. While omega-6 fatty acids are essential themselves, as they are important for brain health, normal growth and development, bone health, hair growth and skin regeneration, healthy metabolism, reproductive health, it is important to remember that excess omega-6 gets converted into arachidonic acid that partially gets converted, among other things, into prostaglandins that cause inflammation and tissue destruction. Again, in small amounts, prostaglandins are very important in the body, but we're talking about the excess. Arachidonic acid itself can also contribute to inflammation and formation of arterial plaque, development of atherosclerosis, oxidative stress, cell damage promoting aging, and even some cancers. And actually, again, I would call to action, watch the video on cholesterol because we reviewed some of those things in that video. Consuming adequate amounts of omega-3s along with omega-6, thanks to shared metabolic pathways, competition for the enzymes, it all prevents conversion of omega-6 into some harmful byproducts that cause inflammation and other adversities. This is why we're focusing on omega-6 to 3 ratio, not just the absolute amounts of omega-3 and omega-6. I had this thought when I was reading the papers, if there is competition for enzymes, then if we are deeply deficient in omega-3, then what if this causes some self-balancing, preventing excessive conversion of omega-6 into its byproducts? I'm thinking that because actually in the papers, vegans show much higher levels of linoleic acid, omega-6, that's the original one that comes from plants, but than omnivores. But they also showed that their arachidonic acid was on par with the omnivores on whatever crappy diet they are. So maybe there is some weird deficit-driven self-balancing like we saw with glycine, because vegans are deficient in methionine and lysine, and they also may be deficient in glycine as well, glycine amino acid. But because they're deficient in methionine and lysine, the spendings of glycine are much lower, so their concentration of glycine in the bloodstream is higher than that of omnivores, because again, it's not getting used. So there are those interesting deficiency interplays that happen that also are only proving the deficiencies. So if we look into the consequences of having excessive omega-6, they are inflammation, swelling and water retention, headaches, nausea and loose stools, high blood pressure, blood clots, increased risk of stroke and heart attack, fatigue, depression, anxiety, weight gain and ability to lose weight, increased risk of cancer, exacerbation of arthritis symptoms. Regardless though, what is the optimal omega-6 to 3 ratio and where it came from? Prior to adopting agriculture, humans were consuming wild game, meats, and wild foliage, so to speak. Wild game animals, grass-fed animals, they have much more polyunsaturated fatty acids in their tissues than their grain-fed counterparts, and like all of those grain-fed domestic animals. And the ratio of omega-6 to 3 in them is on average 2 to 1. Same happens with fruits, same happens with wild grasses, with wild plants. This is what our body had been adapting to for millennia. With the modern agricultural practices, long life expectancy along with active longevity is found in the regions where people consume a lot of seafood, which is the main source of preformed omega-3s in the modern diets that heavily rely on grain-fed livestock, grain-fed dairy, and grains. This appears to me to be the remedy, consumption of seafood, for offsetting this harmful omega-6 to 3 balance that is a result of adopting agriculture. If we look at the map, the fatty acid coefficient is one of the big predictors of longevity, of active longevity. Because again, there is no nation in the world that is free from from the fruits of agriculture. The same result, however, can be achieved from, again, following, on the one hand, whole food diet, staying away from processed foods and seed oils, as well as consuming grass-fed meats, grass-fed dairy, pasture-raised eggs that will have proper omega-6 to 3 balance. Now let's look into EPA and DHA bioavailability and sources. The best source of very long-chain omega-3s is, of course, animal products, such as, of course, seafood as well as grass-fed meat, as they not only contain EPA and DHA, but also come in a form that is highly readily bioavailable. Because of the food matrix consideration, we always think about the first tier of bioavailability limitation through having a lot of fiber that prevents absorption and extraction of nutrients from food. But also animal foods, they contain a lot of fats. They stimulate production, stimulate secretion of certain enzymes, production of bile that help to break down, emulsify the fats and deliver them, absorb them through the intestinal wall. Conventionally considered healthy vegan diet is high in fiber. And different kinds of fiber, they act differently in the body. If we think about some insoluble fibers, then yes, they are the mechanistic impediment to absorbing nutrients. However, there are some soluble fibers as well that bind the bile, preventing absorption of fats. This is one of the tricks that people use, people who promote plant-based diets, when they want to reduce absorption of certain harmful compounds, when they want to reduce cholesterol by just eliminating cholesterol, endogenously produced or exogenous cholesterol. They advise people to consume a lot of fiber. Fiber renders a lot of fats indigestible. That said, fiber is actually quite beneficial. It can be a trick to eat a big salad, for example, if you eat something from fast food, or something with how we know has harmful substances or has a lot of sugar, some certain oils, certain things like foods with trans fats and whatnot. You can help your body by eating a big salad. It will just help to eliminate all of those substances without much absorption. So with that in mind, with the consideration of fiber, if you're vegan and you're striving to get your omega-3s from the only viable source, which is algae oil, you might want to avoid consuming fibrous meals along with taking those supplements. I don't know what would be the best food to increase the affinity of those supplements, that drop of algae oil that you will be consuming, but fiber is definitely not your friend for that. If we look into flax seeds, again, flax seeds there's conflicting information on those, whether they are a viable source of omega-3s or not, and again, strongly depends on the person. First, of course, we need to again, be mindful that it's a plant omega-3, so your conversion will be highly individual. You don't know what percent you personally will be converting. Then second consideration with flax seeds is that if you swallow them whole, then they are not digestible. You will form flax gel when it's in contact with some fluids in the body. That gel will contain some trace amounts of LA, but it will be very small amount. Likely won't fulfill your nutritional needs. You can try to chew them thoroughly, and that probably would be your best bet if you are hoping to extract anything from flax seeds without opting for flax oil, separate issue there, because if you are to grind up flax seeds, then you will be dealing with cyanide. Ground flax seeds, they form cyanide, and you grind them up in contact with air, they readily form cyanide. Some European committees actually advise against consumption of flax seeds beyond certain threshold because of concerns of cyanide poisoning. And if we look into the cyanide content in flax seeds, then ground flax seeds contain on average 150 micrograms per gram of cyanide. Interestingly, also protein and B12 deficiencies make body more prone to cyanide poisoning because those deficiencies reduce your ability to bind and eliminate cyanide from the body. The lethal dose of cyanide is 100 milligrams for 70 kilogram human. A 40 gram serving of flax seeds, the amount needed to nominally satisfy the LA daily dose, contains 6 milligrams of cyanide. So you will be getting approximately 6% of the lethal dose of cyanide each time. Again, some studies show that flax seeds don't increase DHA in the human body, human tissues, bloodstream, or in the milk of lactating women. They're also quite disturbing for the gut if eaten in nutritionally relevant amounts. I'm telling you this as a person who religiously ate 40, 50, 60 grams of flax seeds daily for 3 years as a raw vegan. Another thing to consider here is that if you grind flax seeds up then you will be dealing with such a fun thing as oxidation. Another advice that I heard was to roast flax seeds. Omega-3s, they are not so heat stable. So if you are trying to anneal your flax seeds to reduce cyanide content, you will also break down the fatty acids because they're small, they need to reach certain internal temperature. It's all different with animal products that you heat to protein coagulation temperature pretty much, and then they're edible. With this plant matter, you will be, since it's such a small tiny seed, you will be heating it through very thoroughly. So the lack of effect of vegetable omega-3 fatty acid sources such as linseed and EPA oil on endogenous DHA synthesis seen in the present study agrees with the findings of other papers. Plant-based vegetable oils do not replace the intake of EPA and DHA directly from fish oils, or algae oils. In order to obtain a similar effect, relatively large amounts of vegetable oils have to be used, which are in contrast to the negative consequences of a high-fat intake. The authors might be in the low-fat sect, I guess. So the bottom line is, by default, you're going to be omega-3 deficient as a vegan, and will likely have too high omega-6 as well. Maybe again the exception would be fruitarian people in terms of the ratio omega-6 to 3, but other groups of people will be in this offset. But what if you actually supplement? Because a lot of people, they just are like, okay, I will just take algae oil. Who cares? So the best bet for vegans in terms of supplementation is of course the algae oil. So let's review its properties, because that's the only way to get preformed EPA and DHA on a vegan diet. Regarding serum DHA, significant effects of diet, treatment, and interaction diet and treatment were observed. The values were higher in omnivores, followed by lacto-vegetarians and vegans after placebo. Consumption of the DHA supplement increased DHA significantly compared to placebo in the 3 diet groups, and it was observed a relatively higher increase in vegans that presented similar serum DHA than lacto-vegetarians after the DHA supplement. Nevertheless, lacto-vegetarians and vegans did not reach the DHA levels of omnivores after the supplementation. Total omega-6 shows significant effect of the diet, but not of the supplementation. Values were higher in lacto-vegetarians and vegans than in omnivores after placebo. Total omega-3 shows that vegans had the lowest percentages after placebo, significantly compared to omnivores. Supplementation with EPA and DHA fatty acid on a vegan diet does improve the omega-6 to 3 ratio, does boost DHA in tissues and the bloodstream of vegans. However, it doesn't bring it close to what we see in omnivores, and bear in mind that it's omnivores on some random arbitrary diet that is also quite influenced by all of the food industry things. We're not talking about omnivores on an exemplar, healthy omnivore diet comprising high quality foods and whole foods. When we talk about supplements in general, they're taken on top of the diet. This means that, for example, if you were to eat a meal a day, right? So you would eat, like, let's say chicken. You can substitute chicken with fish. So you will not eat food that is high in omega-6, and you will eat food instead that is high in omega-3. This is how it works when we talk about diet. You get whole food, you get a lot of calories, a lot of complementary nutrition, and you substitute food that would be undesirable with food that would be desirable when you're performing certain nutritional corrections. When we talk about the supplement, let's say you eat chicken that's high in omega-6, and you eat omega-3 supplement that goes on top of it. You're not substituting. You're still having the offensive food, but you put supplement. So you cannot substitute a whole, let's say, virtually dysfunctional meal with some functional substitute. You're still eating the main determinant of your poor diet, but you are adding something on top of that. It just appears to be an extra burden. It's a very strange band-aid. So in this regard, I don't like the philosophy of just substituting foods with supplements. That's why I'm so against the whole vegan nutrition paradigm, because it does substitute nutrition with pills. Strives to do that. Because again, it's easy to prove. I already made so many videos. It is impossible to get all nutrition from vegan diet. Another thing about the supplements is that, again, we need to always keep in mind that they're not food, they're not medicine, they are not regulated, they're in the gray legal zone. With that in mind, there was a finding in 2014. I don't know if since then situation improved or became worse or stayed the same, but there was a paper studying commercially available fish and algae oil that found that they failed to deliver 100% of the declared dose of fatty acids. And it is explained by the natural variations in EPA and DHA in the raw product, but also that with the fact that to be able to comply with the regulations, you need to supply at least 80% of the nominal dose with your supplement of the active compound. And supplement manufacturers, they actively exploit that because it's cost effective. With that in mind, it's also very important to distinguish the dietary supplements and prescription grade supplements. Most of the supplements, they deliver below 75% of the active ingredient. And another thing is that polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are unstable. They readily oxidize when exposed to light, heat, and oxygen, of course. Omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids are chemically unstable, so that marine oils rapidly oxidize during storage to a complex chemical soup of lipid peroxide, secondary oxidation products, and diminishing concentration of unoxidized fatty acids. As a result, the composition of fish oil supplement, extrapolate to algae oil, cannot be simply inferred from the labeled EPA and DHA concentrations. Omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids are highly prone to oxidation due to their large number of double bonds and their position within the fatty acid chain. And omega-3 fatty acids, they're more prone to oxidation than omega-6, than saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, because they just simply have more vulnerable bonds that can be broken with formation of free radicals. It appears that up to 62% of the marine polyunsaturated fatty acid supplements are oxidized. The biological significance of oxidation is that, on the one hand, it may deactivate the compound, rendering it useless, biologically inactive. But on the other hand, the more concerning thing is that it may make the supplements harmful because the resulting peroxidized lipids may be harmful, causing lipid membrane peroxidation, cell damage, and oxidative stress, which are known to be mechanisms of disease. Endogenous membrane lipid peroxidation results in altered membrane fluidity transport and cell signaling, which may also be an important disease mechanism. Chronic lipid peroxidation may be a mechanism of carcinogenesis and in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease, where the secondary oxidation product appears to have a role in both the formation of neurofibrillary tangles and neurotoxicity. Chronic low-grade inflammation is involved in degenerative disease, including atherogenesis and the generation of insulin resistance and the metabolic syndrome. Another thing is that those oxidized fatty acids, they may also contribute to oxidation of cholesterol, which is also proceed to the video on cholesterol that I made. This issue can be contained by adding vitamin E to the supplements. That's what you will often see on the label. However, it does not resolve the issue completely. And given how prevalent oxidation is among the over-the-counter supplements, you are likely going to get the oxidized product. And like with all supplements, with all processed foods, with all of those things, you're entering the territory of arts and crafts and compromise. This is a compromise. Literally, supplementation is the last resort. It should be regarded as the last resort. Back to the difference between dietary and prescription grade omega-3 supplements, the degree of oxidation of the latter is very high, while prescription formulas are typically pure. Overall, our results reveal that 68% of flavored and 13% of unflavored consumer omega-3 supplements exceeded the oxidation upper limit set by Global Organization for EPA and DHA. So this is another thing. If you see flavored supplements, avoid them because they are much more likely to be exceeding all of the oxidation limits. In general, oxidation of unsaturated fats is an interesting topic that spans far beyond the supplements, because this is something I started researching back when I was raw vegan. This is something that made me go against, let's say, consumption of nut butters, seed butters, broken down seeds, and so on. I always opted for chewing the seeds, chewing the nuts, because this is the environment where they can start being healthily broken down. They're not stirred up with air. There's no air bubbling through them. Oxidation of nutrients in general is a huge topic that I really studied. And there are things like vacuum blenders, for example, vacuum dehydrators that help to prevent oxidation of nutrients. This whole thing also made me not interested, not that I was, but it's another added argument against consumption of oils, seed oils included. Plant oils will be prone to being oxidized, partially rancid. That causes them to have free radicals. That causes them to be even more damaging. I, in general, strive to receive all my fats through whole animal foods, and wherever the oils are contained, like nuts, sometimes I eat nuts. Sometimes it's sporadically, I eat maybe avocado somewhere in some dish, but not oils. Again, if you don't have a vacuum oil press at home, that you can squeeze oil, I don't know, from flax seeds right there and just consume it right after it was produced, then it is likely that you will be encountering oxidized oils. I think it is worth being aware that polyunsaturated fatty acids are quite prone to oxidation, and their oxidation may lead to not just their uselessness but to their potential harm. When it comes to adverse effects of the supplements, their oxidation is rarely taken into account as the possible cause of the unwanted outcomes that we see from supplementing with omega-3s, which we don't see from food if we take equivalent doses of omega-3 with food. But I think there is something to it, because again, you're not receiving the fatty acids as nature intended, so to speak. Because most people opting for omega-3 supplement will be getting them at the supermarket. They won't go to the doctor. They won't do blood tests that will establish that they are deficient in omega-3, such that the doctor writes them a prescription for a prescription grade pure supplement. Usually people self-prescribe because it's more economical, and they receive whatever they have at the store, and that's always a gamble. You will likely just get a white label substance that was not properly regulated, that will have some nominally assumed EPA and DHA concentrations. This is why I personally don't understand the widespread obsession with substituting nutrition with supplements and buying them mindlessly. No isolate, no processed food, no synthetic substance will ever fully substitute food. And when we talk about veganism or predominantly plant eating, it is incorrect to call supplements as supplements. They don't supplement, they substitute. And when we think about it in this context, you realize that the supplements that are used as substitutes, they don't really substitute because they're not bioidentical. The omega-3s that you get with, let's say, grass-fed meat, with grass-fed dairy, with fish, they are not the same product that you get from the pill that was sitting on the shelf, that was squeezed out of food, that went through a lot of air exposure, through light exposure, through potentially heat. You don't know where those supplements traveled and sat on the shelf for a while. That has some stabilizers added and so on and so forth. It's not the one-to-one substitute. It's not bioidentical substance. When you think about in this context, you realize that it's not even a substitute, it's a compromise. This is a compromise. And so it's not supplements, it's compromises. So what will happen if you overdose on omega-3 supplements? It's not possible to overdose on omega-3 coming with food, but with supplements, it's a different story, apparently. So the risks associated with omega-3 supplements include gastrointestinal issues, risk of bleeding, especially if you take blood thinners. It will be even worse so. Then increased blood sugar, because large doses of omega-3 can cause overproduction of glucose. So if people with diabetes will have this effect. Low blood pressure. People with already low blood pressure could notice that effect. Healthy whole foods will unlikely do that if you have very healthy, suitable for you diet. When you're in contact with your body, when you are this purely intuitive eating natural products only, knowing all the caveats that arise from obsession with food industry products and agriculture as well. So while you definitely can somewhat benefit from consumption of supplements with EPA and DHA, algae oil as a vegan, you still will not be able to harvest the same benefits if you were to initially be on a healthy, complete, balanced diet. You will put a band-aid slightly, but it is not going to revert back the effects of all the food that you're consuming along with that supplement. And now I invite you to summarize this video. Are you going to be omega-3 deficient on a vegan diet? Very likely, especially if you are not South Asian or African. Are you going to have an unhealthy omega-6 to 3 balance on a vegan diet? Very likely. The exception may be fruitarians and raw vegans who avoid grains, processed foods, seed oils, nuts and grains. Is your brain going to lack omega-3s on a vegan diet? Very likely, especially if you are forced to be vegan child. This is a very critical thing that I would like to emphasize for all the vegan parents running vegan experiment on their children who don't have a choice. But then, in terms of brain health, it's not so much if you receive enough LA on a vegan diet. Maybe, perhaps, depends on your personal properties. You will not know until you try going without omega-3s and then introducing them, that only then you will feel the difference, because deficiencies on the vegan diet, they develop kind of slowly. Deficiencies, especially symptoms of deficiencies, they develop very slowly. Our body is quite resilient, especially if you were on animal-based diet before going vegan. And the final question is, can you actually substitute dietary omega-3s with the supplements? Kind of, maybe, perhaps, if you're wealthy and lucky to find the supplement that contains what it advertised to contain in the form that we would want it to be in, meaning non-oxidized. Then another condition for being able to substitute dietary omega-3s with a supplement is bile secretion, bile production must be healthy, which is also tricky on a long-term vegan diet, especially depending on the profile of your vegan diet. Then another aspect that you need to keep in mind as a vegan is to not consume anti-nutrients such as fiber-rich foods when you're consuming that supplement, but at the same time you need to be eating them with a meal that would stimulate bile production, enzyme production, such that you will be able to extract, emulsify, properly absorb omega-3s from the supplement that you're getting. And another thing, this meal also that you will be consuming the supplement with should not contain the plant oils that are saturated with omega-6. Be mindful of all those factors, and maybe then the supplements will work for you. I hope you enjoyed this video on omega-3s, and in the next video from Vegan Deficiencies series, we will be discussing the conjugated linoleic acid. So I'll see you then.